Almost 3 years ago as of writing, Nintendo released the latest 3D Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. It's fine. It's probably the worst Zelda game. I stand by that. But that doesn't actually mean it's bad, just I liked it fine when I played it, but it left no lasting impact. And upon reflection, a lot more of its flaws started to become apparent. One glaring issue was the game's narrative, or lack thereof. See, that would be fine. There's no issue with a game that tells its story more through whispers or implication, or simply having a narrative that is more focused on the aesthetic or mechanical experience rather than traditional written dialogue. It's just that isn't what the game is. The game has a story, a standard written narrative. It just isn't very interesting. It isn't very well told. It is a regurgitation not just of the series' already worn out tropes, but also of itself, as you watch the same long scene 4 times. It's like the story wasn't written with the game in mind, no consideration given for the format of open world Zelda. It's almost a bit bizarre. When I went to go see what others thought of the game, thankfully I saw countless people agreeing with me that the story was a massive disappointment. Thing is though, as I looked closer at what people were saying, I realized we weren't talking about the same thing at all. They were complaining about how the game contradicted previous entries in the series, even the previous entry in the series. And I find that so interesting, because why? As a kid, Zelda mattered to me more than anything else. I didn't have any friends, but I did have N64 and GameCube. Seriously though, the people around me didn't really care about the series, didn't share my passion for it. So when I started going online, I immediately went to seek out other Zelda fans. What I found was something odd. People who viewed the games in a way I hadn't really considered, as one interconnected narrative, a linear-ish sequence of events. These people were timeline theorists. Essentially, they would look at the games and try to hunt for clues about when the game is set in relation to the others. To some degree, this makes sense. I mean, that guy is clearly this guy. I know because I have eyes and ears. Outside of direct sequels though, this got way more muddy and was all about speculation. This whole thing got shockingly popular over the 2000s. I mean, even AVGN was getting in on it. A video by YouTuber Ocarina Hero 10 demonstrated the popular idea of the split timeline theory, which says that the timeline splits after Ocarina of Time. This video also set up my favorite niche internet drama, where he sent his video to Nintendo and then got genuinely upset they didn't watch it and forwarded to Aonuma and Miyamoto to see what they thought too.
Nintendo, they could have just told me, we're not going to bother reading about your stupid attempts because there is no timeline. We make up different stories and let the fans have at it and argue amongst themselves. Screw you.
When Nintendo said the series did not have a set timeline and was just a legend told in different forms, he decided to start a petition to save Zelda. To these sorts of people, the idea that the series did not have a set timeline is genuinely life-ruining. The petition must have worked because only a few years later, the Hyrule Historia, which contained an official timeline, would be published, with Skyward Sword leaning into it, finally giving these sorts of fans the validation they desired. Ever since, and I guess before too, analysis of the Zelda series has been dominated by lore. Many genuinely began to believe that the timeline, the lore, was so important to the series and has clearly been planned for a long time, built upon. So when Breath of the Wild and then Tears of the Kingdom came out, many people were very confused. This world did not make sense. There was no clear place for it in a linear timeline, and some people were genuinely put off by this. By a new game having a new story. Because what about the lore? So when I say lore, what do I mean? There's a few different but connected ways we could look at it. I'm mostly going to be talking about video games because while other mediums can absolutely have lore, it's a very video gamey thing just by the very nature of the medium. Because on a basic level, lore just means background information. You have the direct written narrative, the thing that plays out as you progress through the game, and then you have the lore, backstories, things that happened outside or before the main story, you know, world building. Video games simply have more space, more time for that sort of thing. You can stop the story and look somewhere else. I'm not here to say that lore is inherently awful, because like everything else, it's a tool. It would be deeply strange to imply that world building is bad. Instead, I'm interested in the internet's fixation with lore, how important it has become, how it seems for many the concepts of lore and story are interchangeable, and how this has influenced both narrative writing and the analysis of it. For an example of how this is supposed to work, let's talk briefly about Dark Souls. Dark Souls has a huge lore community, with videos on the subject gaining millions of views, and unlike all the other examples we're going to talk about today, this is fine. See, Dark Souls is set up that way. It doesn't have a standard cinematic story. Instead, you, the player, are put into a deeply strange world that you don't understand, and are tasked with piecing it together yourself if you so choose. You do this from cryptic character dialogue, item descriptions, and environmental storytelling. It's the point. It creates quite an interesting relationship between you, the player, and the world you inhabit. Dark Souls is so deliberately strange and cryptic that engaging with it in this way and coming together to try solve the many mysteries of its world makes sense. But not every game is like Dark Souls. I'm not blaming the series for this, but it was definitely one contributing factor to this odd form of media criticism. See, I'm not exactly talking about lore analysis itself, which is fine, just not for me, but instead what I'm calling lore-based analysis, where it's like the only thing you talk about, the foundation of how you view these stories, often at the cost of the true point. If we look back at Zelda, to new fans it may not seem that strange, but to people like me, the idea that the series was very lore-heavy is a bit baffling. There aren't a lot of books or item descriptions to glean things from, and especially with the 3D games onwards, they were honestly a bit heavy-handed in what they're actually about. It's very hard to miss Ocarina of Time's themes of maturity, of growing up, of responsibility, and even how these heavy burdens can force people to act as adults before they're ready, and to possibly rob them of their childhood. So even if they try to relive it, it won't be the same. That innocence is lost. Yet it seems many kinda do miss it. If we look at Ocarina of Time not as a single text worth considering as a whole, and instead just one step in a broader overarching narrative, it's easy to miss the actually important details. The game instead becomes a story about splitting the timeline. Something it never really considered, a retcon based on fan pestering. Why though? See, if we take this lore-based approach, we run into a massive problem immediately. Zelda isn't like Dark Souls. There is no mystery to solve, at least not within each game. With games like Dark Souls, you're often piecing a history together, but again, Zelda tells you what you need to know. They are direct, not exactly blunt, but not exactly hidden either. So when you analyze the text like this, there are typically two outcomes. You either try piece the history of the game together, which leaves you with a plot summary, which we will talk about, or you manufacture a mystery to solve. And this is what timeline theorists did. It was pretty clear that The Legend of Zelda was that, a legend. A story retold in countless different forms. And like real legends, the story changes to suit different messages, different themes. These games do not make sense together. They outright contradict each other in major ways. Historically, geographically, technologically, all of the Icalies. And that's perfectly fine. Hyrule is not a real place and does not have to function as one. It is instead a concept, the vague idea of a fantasy kingdom that can be molded and broken apart to fit whatever the text needs. Timeline theorists and other Zelda lore people tend to ignore this and do their analysis across texts, treating the inconsistencies between games as the mystery to be solved. The thing about this is that it is actually cool and fine in a vacuum. The Zelda timeline is a fun thought experiment and requires you to do genuine media analysis, engage with the text on a deeper level than many are willing to. Importantly though, it's primarily a creative writing exercise, it's fan fiction. Even if not presented as such, these people are writing brand new stories in the world of Zelda that they think bridge the gaps. And that's where the issue is. Rather than accepting what they've made as a cool fanfic, they, pester Nintendo until it becomes official, until it becomes the way you're supposed to look at Zelda. This flattens the game's stories. Ocarina of Time isn't about maturity anymore. Majora's Mask no longer contains themes of dread, and Twilight Princess isn't about being a dog. They look at the series often deeply evocative and striking imagery, and instead of attaching it to the game's themes, they go, damn, that's spooky. Something dark must have happened between these games. I don't think any single work has been hit with this worse than Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask is a somewhat surreal game, and that is very much on purpose. Zelda games, especially the 64 ones, have always had this sort of dreamlike quality to them. This willingness to break from realism allows them to express their ideas in much more novel ways, and Majora's Mask's Termina is a great example. It is nothing more than this vague suggestion of a country. The city of Clocktown is an odd, out-of-time place, so different from anything we saw in Ocarina of Time. The point that I'm getting at is that Termina is a very ethereal and, dare I say, uncanny place. I'll be expecting some Reddit gold for that observation. That being said, often people do not appreciate the abstraction of these worlds. So much time has been spent on trying to explain Termina, what it is, who created it, all these things that don't matter. Not just that, but actively go against the strengths of the game. Termina doesn't exist because of some evil magic, because of some trickster god. It exists because it is the perfect world for Majora's Mask's story. I guess that's kind of the thing I've neglected to talk about. The story. When I say story, I don't just mean the plot. On a basic level, Majora's Mask is about the hero of time saving the day again, a direct continuation of Ocarina of Time. But that's boring. It's important to remember that Majora's Mask is its own work, separate from Ocarina of Time, and it is absolutely valid to see it as such. When we take the lore-ish, historical approach, it limits what we can do. It brings in a sort of baggage, because now our analysis must not contradict something from an entirely different text, just because these two dickheads look the same. By treating the text like a world that has history, it turns symbols into people. And while that can be a perfectly valid interpretation, it isn't the only one. This Link only has a past if we give it to him. This world only has to function next to this one if we say it does. If we instead look at their world as symbols, icons for themes the games are trying to communicate, I think it creates a much richer, more evocative narrative, one that more closely resembles something like folklore, myths, a legend. Instead, often the games are squished down into a timeline, an easily understandable series of events, a linear sequence of scares.
Funhouse is a linear sequence of scares. Take it or leave it is the only choice given. Makes you think about free will.
When I think lore, at least in the context of the modern internet, one strange multimedia franchise comes to mind. Five Nights at Freddy's. Don't click off, don't click off, don't click off. I don't know Five Nights at Freddy's, the series. Who is that? What? See, while I'm not a Five Nights at Freddy's fan, I am a Five Nights at Freddy's fan. I don't think that emphasis cleared anything up. I like the first one. This often surprises people because I almost exclusively talk about action-adventure games released between the 10-year period of 96 to 06, but no, genuinely. The game is pretty good. It may sound absurd to say, but Five Nights at Freddy's is kind of a perfect game. That doesn't mean it's the best game. God no, that title obviously goes to Big Rigs and Highguard. Instead, I just think it's a near flawless execution of what it sets out to do. If you're somehow unaware, Five Nights at Freddy's is a 2014 horror game where you, as a security guard, watch over Chuck E. Cheese animatronics through cameras. It is a very simple game, and that's one of its major strengths, the fact that it's so limiting. You know very little. All of the information you get comes from a strange man on the phone and what you can see through dark, noisy cameras. Like with Zelda, there's a certain dreamlike quality to it. The main thing you see is an uncanny suggestion of a kid's entertainment restaurant, of a security guard's office. The game leaves you with so many questions, and the way it answers them is what I want to talk about. See, Five Nights at Freddy's tells its story mostly through lore. I mean, there is the basic story. You are someone in need of a job, so you get one. And as it turns out, it sucks. Big surprise. What I mean everything outside of that basic premise. Explaining your horror world poses a serious risk, because fear of the unknown is one of the strongest tools you have. However, Five Nights at Freddy's handles its lore like it does everything else. It's there primarily to fuck with you. You can play the entire game and still have no clue what is actually going on. Hell, if you do try to pay attention, there's a chance you'll miss something. You could miss a lot of things. To understand this, you need to put yourself in the role of the player here. You've been staring at these same few cameras for hours. They're one of the only ways you can interact with the setting at all. And as you flip through the same shot for the 100th time, something catches your eye. But unfortunately, you had already clicked off. As you try switch back to that camera, it's exactly as it always was. Nothing had changed. Clearly, the paranoia of the game has been getting to you and you're seeing things. Then, hours later, by some miracle, it happens again. Something has changed. It's so subtle, so good, and so rare. Some of these events have insane odds, like 1 in 100,000. Well, actually, due to a programming error, it's more like 1 in 30,000. That's still nuts though. The one I probably showed is this, the newspaper extracts that replace the rules notice. These are lore, and in any other game, I'd think they were kinda bad. They just tell you a bunch of shit. It's exposition, but it's the context in which they're presented that make them work. It's noteworthy that these moments look past the character. These are not addressed to the security guard, they're addressed to you. It's a very video gamey way of storytelling. It plays around with the format, uses the medium it's in to its advantage. The story itself as told by the clippings is fine. It isn't groundbreaking, but it is unnerving with some genuinely gross imagery. It's this combined with, well, everything else that allows the player to put 2 and 2 together, to slowly realize what is going on. That isn't how most people experience the game's story, however. They did not piece it together from esoteric clues and bizarre hallucinations. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is a very weird game, because it takes the original and turns it from a unique and creative one-off horror game into a franchise. Rather than through easily missable clues, the game tells its story through these Atari-esque mini-games that sometimes play after you die. This is kind of cool and interesting, and could definitely be jarring when playing for the first time. While these do directly show you the events that lead up to the series, and that is kind of lame, there is enough abstraction and bizarre imagery for it to be acceptable. It marked a shift in direction for the series, as it had a new audience in mind, one that probably explains the pivot to more direct forms of storytelling. Still, these scenes contain some of what made the first game so interesting, either through shock value or genuinely compelling mysteries. The issue is, that isn't how most people experienced the game's story. They did not piece it together from abstract minigames, at least not themselves. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is the last game in the series I played, and the only other one I consider to be good outside of the first. To me, it is one of the few examples where being a directly connected sequel actually enhances the text. Set decades after the original, the incident at Fazbear's Pizzeria is now an urban legend, a local scary story. This is so interesting and vivid to me, the tragedy of it all having long since dissipated in the cultural consciousness, the only thing left being a sensationalized horror story. And in the game, you play as a security guard for a shitty haunted house style tourist trap in an amusement park. Unfortunately though, we do see another step towards basic storytelling. The previously startling random Atari minigames now happen every single night. They are just a direct continuation of the game, a part of the main story now. Thankfully though, there are others outside of these end of night games, and some of them are pretty cool. My favorite being the one that you unlock by dialing a code into the tiles in the wall. That's so fucking good. It's playing around with the format. It is insane and esoteric, and that is not how most people saw this minigame. Despite giving a concise and fitting conclusion to the series, not that it really needed one, they still made a fourth. There's a few reasons for this, primarily money, but also because people wanted answers. It's interesting, because FNAF 4 is probably the least and most literal game so far at the same time, with the standard gameplay segment clearly taking place within a nightmare. It's everything that surrounds it. The minigames return. Not only are they more literal narratively with there being direct dialogue, but also aesthetically as well, being more detailed. suggesting less and showing more. The game seeks to give the series a backstory, explain what was implied, because for some reason, for many, that is how you tell a good story. That said, even at their easiest to access, even at their most literal, this is still not how many people experienced the story of Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Instead, a lore community cropped up around it, one dedicated to explaining away Five Nights at Freddy's, to pull back the curtain, remove the mystery, turn it from a bizarre one-off horror game into an interwoven narrative, and the games would start to cater more and more to that audience, until it became so bloated, so many things happening, as the first killer, William Afton, is now some like insane manifestation of evil or some shit, I don't know. And no matter what happens, no matter how much bullshit gets crammed in there for rabid lore fans, I must remind you, it all still has to revolve around Chucky fucking Cheese. Has this ever happened to you?
Oh my god, I've woken up on some sort of fucking island and I don't even really know what's going on. Oh, if only there was some way that I could possibly get some help.
That's great. You need to join the Kai's Home for Aspiring Vampires server. What? You can send text, images, maybe a cheeky little bit of sound. Listen to this. What is that sound, man? Oh my god. Call your friends. Who needs a phone when you have the Kai's Home for Aspiring Vampires community server? Oh! We have such great features, amazing emotes, fun commands.
Carl, help me find land. Carl, bet my father. Tropically.
Don't believe me because you're a cold-hearted piece of shit? Okay, fine. Just listen to these glowing reviews. Why is he on the ground? Oh my god, is he dead? Is that still not enough for you? Is that still not fucking enough for you? Okay, fine. Well, you're in fucking luck, asshole. Okay, picture this. You have money? Alright, now imagine a world where I had it instead. Patreon. Check it out. Starting at $1 a month. What? But if you want to pay a little bit more, pay a little bit extra, you can get a whole bunch of cool shit. Behind the scenes stuff. Concept art, woo, and video previews way before the video comes out. So go on, pick a tier. Come on, we don't go all day. Come on, go check out the website. Come on. Look, man, we only got one life. Are you really going to go through your entire life without ever having given me money? Imagine having that in your tombstone. What are you, fucking stupid? Welcome to the intermission. This is where we just kind of take a bit of a break from the main video because they tend to have a lot of stuff. They're pretty dense. The intermission is also where we do a teeny tiny little bit of plugging. You should follow me on Blue Sky. That's where I post my art and shit. And if you like the visual style of the videos, then you're gonna enjoy the stuff on there. This is also where we show any fan art if we've gotten any. And if you want to submit your own, there's a dedicated channel on the server, but also you can tag me in it on social media and stuff. I mean, that's kind of the main thing. And I'm just left here wondering, is there a lore explanation for the intermission? My favorite video essay on all of YouTube is not the deepest, not the most profound, not the most visually stunning. Jesus, that sounds like an insult. I'm just trying to say it's a pretty simple one, but it spoke to me. Spoke about something that had been bothering me for as long as I had been engaging with media discourse online. That video is Folding Ideas, Annihilation, and Decoding Metaphor. The video deals with the deeply shallow analysis found within movie explained videos that ignore the very obvious themes of the work, reject analyzing the metaphors clearly present in favor of a linear sequence of events, in favor of treating the plot as a puzzle to solve. What happened, when it happened, who it happened to, and what that means in a diegetic sense. Not what it means to us, the audience, but instead, in the case of Annihilation, what the aliens are gonna do to the world. This is not exclusive to movie explained videos, it is not exclusive to movies. Interestingly is how in the video, Olsen pulled an example from a literal content farm, and otherwise even a guy who admitted to not wanting to look too deep into it. Outright anti-intellectualism. What I find interesting thing is that it feels like more and more I am seeing this form of analysis from people who care. From video essayists, from dedicated and passionate fandom. To many, this is how you tell an interesting story. Diegetically justify everything that happens in it. Give a satisfying and clear explanation. In my own audience, I've had people disagree and even agree with my takes on things and still use strange lore-based justifications for doing so. In my video on PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 aesthetics, I talked a bit about Resident Evil 4, how it was this precursor to a lot of what the 7th generation would do. Part of that being that it is ultimately a story about an American government agent entering a foreign country and killing all the everybody so very hard. I wasn't even trying to condemn the game, at least not too strongly. It's like my favorite game of all time. I was only recognizing a feature of it, a pattern. Yet, I was interestingly met with comments reminding me that Leon had to do it, because the president's daughter was kidnapped. And plus, these are infected guys anyway, they're not even normal dudes. Acting as if the game was simply an event that happened. Another world that follows clear logic, not a story created by real living human beings with ideas, who were influenced by real events, by other media, real people who could have written a story where anything could have happened, because it's not real. To ignore that, to treat the text as just an event in one large world, is so fucking weird. In 2005, Chicago film critic Roger Ebert, God rest his soul, said something to the effect of, "I fucking hate video games. If any one of you dickhead gamers show me another goddamn game, I'm gonna fucking flip and go absolutely Roger mode on you," or something like that. Essentially, he said that video games weren't art, and implied that they could merely contain it. Of course, this was quite controversial, despite being a surprisingly progressive take from an old man in 2005. The Last of Us hadn't even come out yet, and that's the first ever game to have a story. One of the justifications that Ebert gave was that the gameplay inherently took away from the art. That art is created by artists, and you playing it, you moving things around, modifying the events, disturb that, break from the artist's vision. Of course, this is wrong and people rightfully pointed that out. But honestly, I don't think people really act like it isn't the case. Honestly, I think even passionate game critics and fans alike still act as if games merely contain art. This is the final and ultimate issue with lore. For too long now, it has been standard to criticize gameplay and story as separate things, and not two aspects of the same narrative. I think fandom's obsession with canonicity plays into this. There must be a true set of events, and everything you do in the game is a deviation from it. This is the wiki pageification of stories. Now that is a slop video essay title, Jesus. You'd half expect me to start making bizarre drama live streams. Even if you don't believe that story and gameplay are entirely separate, I'm willing to bet that you kinda act like it is. I'm guilty of it. This is most likely for two reasons. The fact that early on in the medium, direct storytelling was scarce or done outside of the work in the form of guidebooks and manuals, or that when narrative started to become less abstract and more obviously important, it closely resembled pre-existing, more understood mediums. In between your more abstract gameplay are scenes that are essentially just an animated movie, and we know how to criticize movies. This robs games of their unique traits, particularly interaction. The gameplay is the story as much as the dialogue. These are two aspects of one work, of one narrative. This goes for even extremely cinematic games, games that sometimes people say would work better as movies. When you do not consider how the gameplay is the story, you miss the whole picture. You have an incomplete view. You are missing out on the full range of emotions and experiences the work can produce. A lore-based analysis instructs us to take this approach, because lore is all about what happened and when, a historical ordering of events. But gameplay is dynamic, it isn't fixed, but it is just as important. Lore turns stories into wiki pages, which are just summaries, plain text. When people express their love of a game's lore, this is what comes into my mind. Cool sounding stuff. Ideas that look interesting on paper, but do they actually mean anything? Plenty of stories make for fascinating reads on a wiki, but does that make them actually compelling? It would be one thing if it was contained to wiki pages, which for the record it makes sense if they only have basic information. They're here to collect facts. But how many video essays have you seen throughout the years that are just summarizing? How much criticism have you seen that separate written narrative and gameplay into two separate things entirely? How much of fandom culture has always seemed to revolve around simply just knowing things, knowing a lot of stuff about a work's world? That means you understand it, I guess. This idea that lots of information, lots of answers, lots of connections to the past, building on old ideas means a good, compelling story is how we get games like Resident Evil Requiem. Spoiler warning, I guess. Though I promise you will not be missing out on much. The game was initially shown as a new game, with a new protagonist and a genuinely potent atmosphere. It seemed like Capcom was continuing on with the Resident Evil style.
I forgot the number. I don't know how I forgot the number. 7. The Resident Evil 7 style.
And it's pretty good. The issue is that it is like a third of the game. The bulk of it instead asking the very brave question, what if Resident Evil 4 Remake was bad? This happened for a few reasons, but the most bizarre thing is the positive reception. People generally like this. While I don't want to take that away from anyone, I do find it really odd. It is one of the most shallow, blatant, remember the guy games I've seen in a long time. There are large portions of Resident Evil fans who clap when they see something they remember. And honestly, if you're a lore head, doesn't that kind of make sense? If you're invested in unraveling the mystery that is the plot, if you care about getting answers to questions you previously had, if you are invested in the overarching narrative, then well, who gives a shit about this new person? Show me Leon, show me what he's up to. Lore-based analysis encourages the worst aspects of big franchises. It unintentionally celebrates rehashing, the reusing of old characters, the constant callbacks, because without them, we wouldn't know that it was all one big universe. It limits what these games can do, what they can be, because they're always somewhat beholden to the past. What they do, what they say, and your analysis of it has to not contradict past games or common fan theories, or else it will genuinely upset people. This is an active detriment to Resident Evil. Look, it's one thing to have returning characters or connections to them. The games, even at their most unique, have always done that. This is why I don't really have an issue with Grace, despite also being another connection to the past. The thing is that these are horror games. Fear of the unknown is a pretty big deal, and lore runs directly counter to this. If every game is connected, then the world quickly becomes bloated and just way too silly. Not only that, but we understand how things function, what our characters are capable of, how strong they are, because they've been reused so often, turned into mascots, and there is also a lack of tension. We know that they're going to be fine. Resident Evil 7 does not feel like a game where the US had blown up one of its own cities. It does not feel like a game set in a world where Italy used the raw power of the sun to melt a futuristic floating utopia because it got overrun with monsters. And yet, it is. While it initially seems new, seems fresh, seems separate, it too falls into the lore vortex. I don't think it's entirely a coincidence that as it starts connecting itself more to the past, it starts to lose its own unique identity, lose what made it so great in favor of the usual: automatic weapons, explosions, and Chris Redfield. 9 takes this further, abandoning something genuinely interesting in favor of a wasteland of callbacks. If you try to analyze the game on its own, you get something genuinely incomprehensible. Alternatively, this lore-based approach can often make games seem more interesting than they actually are. If we take Resident Evil 5 as an example, if you look at a summary of its story, you may come away thinking it's about eugenics and colonialism and evil corporations. And while those aspects are there, the game is actually about punching really hard. I don't say this to be anti-intellectual, or to shame people from trying to read deeper into seemingly ridiculous works. Not at all. I am saying that if you actually scrutinize the game, actually look at what it does, how it does it, you will understand that the game barely gives lip service to these ideas before going back to what it is truly about. Man catch rocket midair with bare hands. What all of this has done, the separation of gameplay and story, the wiki pageification of narrative, is create this strange, vicarious consumption by proxy. Resident Evil has a LARPer problem, or so I've been told. What it means is a lot of people who say they are Resident Evil fans either openly admit to not wanting to play the games or have pretended to play them for whatever reason. I hate the discourse around this because, while it is a real issue, so much energy has been spent naming and shaming people. I've seen videos on the subject use real random fans' actual faces as thumbnails, and if you do that, fuck you, man. That's weirdo shit. And if you watch that, fucking cop on, you're so weird. That being said, I think this sort of thing was inevitable. If we separate gameplay and story, as we often do, then it stands to reason that many people think they can get the experience of a game without actually playing it. Remember FNAF? It's not just that people didn't make the discoveries themselves. Often, they did not play the games. They watched someone else do it, or watched some recap of the lore, and I am entirely sympathetic to these people. Given that I'm talking about series like FNAF and Resident Evil in this video, there's a non-0% chance that you engage with game stories like this. I get it. Games, unlike every other medium, require a much more involved form of engagement, and that can be intimidating. Not only that, but they're often expensive. The device you're watching this on can play any movie ever made, but there is a very high chance it can't play a modern game. Rather than shame you, I just want to make an appeal. You should play games. When you treat game stories like this, you flatten them down, contort them into a shape they were never meant to be. One that may initially be more understandable, yes, but lacks the full range of emotions present. Resident Evil is a fantastic example, and why I brought it up in this video in the first place. If we flatten the game down into just a video, then we lose the actual core of the experience. It is a very mechanically driven series. If you like the settings, like the characters, like the aesthetics and the notes strewn around the place, all of those hit harder when you're actually playing. Resident Evil games can be tense in a way that make you feel triumphant for succeeding, or tense in a way that makes you feel paranoid. They can be terrifying and hilarious and absurd and atmospheric, and you are driving all of it. These are things happening to you. You have to push forward through the darkness. It makes you connect more with the characters, with the world. Can you truly understand Five Nights at Freddy's without feeling the creeping tension of increasingly aggressive threats, or the unsettling realization that the text on the wall you've looked at hundreds of times is suddenly and inexplicably different? Can you genuinely understand ZELDA without that sense of adventure, that wonder you get when the world opens up for the first time, or the satisfaction of solving a puzzle? Can you understand Resident Evil 4 unless you are doing the backflip? Interaction changes everything. These stories do not exist in a vacuum away from the gameplay. They are both one, the same thing. This attitude is unfortunately not exclusive to just casual fandom people. It is shockingly accepted in criticism, and what it does is prove Ebert right. When we look at story and gameplay separately, when we take these narratives away from the game and put them in a cutscene compilation, a wiki page or lore explained video, and act like it is the text, we are not treating games like art. We are acting as if they merely contain it. It positions gameplay as a chore you have to get through to get to the real art, the hidden book or film within. This allows for replacement. If we position these works as true art trapped within a game, then it isn't a huge deal to change the gameplay part, to make it more palatable, easier to understand, more modern looking. It's still the same story. Do not get me wrong. Some of these remakes are phenomenal games, 9 out of 10s and all that, but what they aren't is the original. These are two very separate experiences, as good as both of them may be. When we say things like games need remakes or remasters to help bring them to new people and modern audiences, that is not only insulting to the game, reinforcing the idea that they only contain art, but also insulting to modern audiences. If you are a casual fandom person watching this video, I don't think you're that useless. I don't think you need everything dumbed down, flattened, and simplified for you. I fully believe that you can play and enjoy games of all sorts. Again, if you like Resident Evil's world, its characters, hell, even if you're here for the lore, play the games. If you're not used to it, it will be difficult at first. It will take some time for you to adjust. But overcoming that, getting over that first hurdle, opens you up to many amazing, unique experiences. There are things games can do that no other medium can, and those stories you already enjoy can be made so much richer through interaction. If you like watching streamers play the game or lore explained videos, you can still watch those. But you should play the game too if you want to get the full experience, if you want to be a fan of it. Otherwise, as kinda snobby and gatekeepy as it sounds, though I think you can guess that isn't my intention, what you're really a fan of is essentially an animated movie, an intriguing synopsis, or a compelling essay, and those are all good and interesting, but so is the game. I understand hardware and financial constraints, but if you have a computer, then DuckStation, Dolphin, Flycast, PCSX2, these are just a handful of software that can run countless amazing games pretty easily without the need for giant PCs. Not to mention the amount of classic or well-optimized games on PC currently. For N64 games, you could look into decomps and recomps. While yes, these are often used for quote-unquote enhancements, but with the right settings, they can be even more console accurate than emulators. The point is, the options are there, and clearly if you're here, you care about games somewhat, so please consider it. It doesn't have to cost that much. It doesn't have to be resource intensive. The only thing between you and endless phenomenal experiences is just taking that first leap into a less intuitive medium. And if you are someone who already does play games and you're still a lore head, I get it. As I said, sometimes lore is cool and fun, but understand that it's not the only way of looking at things. Understand the drawbacks with it dominating game criticism, and try looking at things another way, a more abstract way. If you're a Zelda theorist, maybe don't take Majora's Mask so literally. Maybe this time think of it as its own work, separate from Ocarina of Time. See what themes and ideas crop up and thought about in more metaphorical terms. And maybe let things go unexplained. Let the art suggest rather than just tell. Let it end. Don't encourage stories to drag on. Open yourself up for new ideas, new stories. Don't let these IPs get so bloated. Don't just stick to what you know. I've been Kai from Kai's Home for Aspiring Vampires. And, is there a lore reason this video is so cringe and bad? I would just like to thank patrons Queen of Fish Burrito, Becky, Ewint, Stelly, Dasha, Dayglow, Goma, Nico, Saxon, Sammy3D, and It's June for their support.